Hi, I'm Beryl Roberts and I live in Brisbane, southern part of Brisbane, and I'm now retired, but I have had a long life teaching. I had a teacher in grade 4, Mr. Bartlett, who wasn't a very good teacher, I didn't think, and I thought I could do better than that. And that's what made me think, oh, well, maybe I should do teaching. And of course, when I told my parents I was interested in doing teaching, they said, well, probably you're best to go to State High for that because that's an academic high school. And it was equidistant to State High and Cooperoo State High School, which was fairly new. And I could get the trolley bus to either, so it was easy. So I went to State High and I loved it and was there for 4 years and got a scholarship a teacher's scholarship. So I went on to Teachers College for 2 years and then I had to teach for the government for 2 years. That was your bond. So they sent me to Serviceton, which was, now it's called Durack State School, but it was Serviceton State School in those days, and there were 1,000 students there, and I was given grade 1. I didn't really want to teach grade 1. So I had to teach. I couldn't say I didn't want to, I just had to do what I was told. So I got a grade 1 class of nearly 50 kids, I think, in a terrible classroom that was built in under the school with a concrete floor and great big brick posts in the middle of the room. So I had to look around to see my students, and they had the same problem looking at the blackboards. And there was no lights in the room except over the blackboards. And when it was a dark day, if I put the lights on, it was like me on the stage and the kids were out there somewhere. It was shocking. It was a terrible classroom, and we had what was called malthoid on the floor, and it's usually a substance, a mat of some sort that they put on roofs to make buildings waterproof, but this was on the floor of our concrete. And in hot days, my heels used to get caught down in the malthoid because it was so hot and sweaty. And some of my memories of early days. Then the next year I got a grade 5, and Jackie was in my class, which was good. But in the first year and the 3 years I was there, I volunteered to be the softball coach. I had no idea about softball. I'd always played tennis. And so I had to learn all the rules of softball, and the kids were good. They knew the rules better than I did, but I had to umpire, so I had to learn the rules. And we used to play inter-school. There were, I think, 7 primary schools within a half a mile of one another in Inala in those days, with over 1,000 kids in each school. And Friday afternoons, it was sports afternoons, so we would walk to the next school, or sometimes they'd get a bus if there was a bus going. Or they'd hop in the back of my Mini and I'd tootle down and come back and get another load and tootle down. I think I had 12 or 13 kids in the Mini one time. They're only little kids. Don't tell anyone.
People now would have a heart attack.
Oh, yeah. Well, there wasn't any traffic on the road, and it was the middle of the afternoon, like early afternoon, and it was only from, say, a half a mile away down the road, straight down. And then it was 65, 66 and 67. And then in 68, I got married. So in those days, I had to retire. I got married, and I just wanted to keep teaching because we weren't planning to have children or think of family for a couple of years. So I sat around I got married in the early January, so I sat around till the end of January hoping that they'd re-employ me. I had to reapply. So on my way to my wedding reception, I had my reapplication letter to the Education Department, which I mailed on the way. And it was another 6 weeks after school started before they put me back on, which I was very annoyed about, really. But there's nothing I could do about it, it's different for men. They just kept working. But women, different thing. Wasn't happy. I've always been interested in my family and what members of my family have done, both my mother's side and my father's side. Probably when I went to, when I was in primary teaching, I went to university. Griffith Uni became, you could go there for no fees. And so I went to, I was teaching all day and I'd go to uni at night, up at Griffith Uni at Nathan. And I did English and I had to choose something else and I thought, oh, I'll do history. And that's really where I got my interest in history, I think, I'm pretty sure. There's probably a lot of reasons why. Certainly we can learn things from history, mistakes people make and the good things people do. But it's sort of, in a way, with family history, knowing where you've come from and what your ancestors did or how you were raised and how you were brought up and that sort of thing is probably what you're going to carry on doing with your own children if you're married and have children.
And you wrote a bit about your own family history in Mudgeeraba Memories, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And that wasn't because I necessarily needed to do that, but it was because the people in Mudgeeraba, where my grandparents came from, my mum and my dad came from, they had decided they were going to do the history of Mudgeeraba, and everyone said, oh, we can do that, but nobody can do the writing. We're not skilled at that. So I don't know how I got involved with that, but it was something to do because, oh, I know, I was representing my family because Dad had passed away and I went down in his place, really, to the reunion, and they said they were going to do their memories, and I said, oh, I probably could help with that. And then that's what happened. I just recorded or interviewed people and recorded their memories, wrote it up, asked them to have a look at it, see if you wanted anything changed, and when they were all happy with that, it was published.
So once you got started with the writing, though, did you plan to sort of continue, or was it just a natural progression? Oh, I'll write about this and then I'll write about that? Or?
Well, when it got published, you know, other people sort of made contact with me and said, you think you could help me with this and that and something else? So, what was the family?
Jeays.
I wrote,
the Joshua Jeays family? Is that what?
Yeah, Joshua Jeays. One of his children, I think, contacted me and said, oh yeah, would you like to, would you be able to? And I said, well, I'd need to interview people, and they were having a family gathering, and so I got to meet quite a lot of them, and then I said, look, can you give me your details, I'll contact you. And that was either actually physically going and talking to them or talking on the phone with them. And then I did the same thing. I took notes, wrote it down, sent it to them, got them to approve it, change it, whatever, and then they put it together.
And this progressively writing books happened while you were working and raising a family, and how did you do all that? Well,
my husband was working, I was working, the kids were at primary and high school. I don't know. You just do it. I probably did it mostly at night. So when the kids were in bed, I'd go in and just say to Jeff, oh, I'm just going to go and do a bit of writing for a while. And then he'd come and say, time to go to bed. You've been working too long. So I'd go to bed.
Can you tell us about your grandparents' separation and the effect that had?
Well, that happened in 1947. I was born in 1944, so I didn't really, it didn't affect me. I was only a baby, a little child. But the really amazing thing about that was Dad was one of three sons, and my grandparents, this is Dad's parents' side, they separated in 1947, and my grandfather, who had a problem with drink, left the farm at Mudgeeraba and left my grandmother and Uncle Bert, who was Dad's next brother up, not his oldest brother, but his middle brother, and left them to run the farm, a dairy farm, with, 70 cows coming in for milking every morning and every afternoon, and just generally running the farm and making sure everything was okay. And so they stayed down there for a while, and Dad had come to Brisbane. He'd come and got a job as a cab driver in black and white cabs. And he didn't own a cab, but he drove a cab for somebody else. And we were living at Annerley, Greenslopes, a place called Marquis Street. And Dad had the cab. So I went to Junction Park State School, primary school, first, until Mum and Dad bought the house at East Brisbane, where we lived until I got married, and Dad lived there after that. So that was our family home, really, at East Brisbane. And the thing about my grandparents' separation was that both Dad's older brothers didn't want to have anything to do with them. Didn't care. Didn't want to have anything to do with Pop, I should say, my grandfather. But they looked after Nan. And my dad looked after Nan as well, but he also looked after my grandfather, who went to live at Blackbutt. He was a saddler. And very often, maybe once every 6 weeks or so, we'd take a trip up to Blackbutt, see Pop, hi, how you going? And he loved that. But he lived a really lonely life, I think, and a bit sad, really, because, he just lived on his own, basically. He had a friend that used to come up occasionally and help him with his saddlery, but he just worked in the saddlery shop there.
Do you think he was happy alone?
I don't know. I think he got on the drink a bit. I don't think it. I think that was his issue, really. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother would have a drink, but she wasn't, like he was. He was really into it. Which made me think I didn't really want to drink.
And what happened to your mother?
She used to take Bex. And in those days, nobody knew. I think it had phenacetin or something like that in it. And Bex and Vincent's were the two powders that people would take to give them a high. And then once they got off the high, they'd take another one. Mum would be taking a whole packet of 12 Bex a day. And it really wrecked her kidneys.
Tell us more about the rewards of teaching. What did you get out of it?
Well, some days it was hard slog. But, it was just lovely to see kids learning and getting to know one another, and there were other lovely teachers that I met that were very helpful. Some didn't help much at all. Not that I did need help when I was first teaching, but I just watched everything else and gradually learned what you're supposed to do. And even if people didn't tell me, I sort of learned. And if I didn't, I'd ask. But, I just enjoyed being with young kids and meeting their parents and that sort of thing. I really enjoyed it.
And what do you think's the biggest misconception people have about being or becoming a teacher?
It's really different today. In those days, parents were really grateful that their teachers did so much for their kids and would tell them, he hasn't done his homework last night. Can you make sure he does his homework tonight? This sort of thing. Whereas today, if parents complain about something, if they don't go to the teacher directly, they'll go straight to the head teacher and complain. Then the head teacher comes back and says, what are you doing? Which is not very pleasant. And so I when that sort of thing started happening, not that it happened to me very much, I can't even remember anything. like that. But I know it happened to some of my mates who were teaching. I think you need to be mindful of other people's emotions and feelings. Sometimes when you say something, it can really hurt somebody. And some people aren't aware of that. They just say it and walk off and don't even care whether they've really hurt someone's feelings or not. I think to be encouraging, to encourage kids to really do something. Like I said to Jackie Huggins' mother, Rita, you know, your daughter should go to university. And of course Rita said to all the other friends of hers, oh, Mrs. Roberts said it might have been Miss Smith then. Miss Smith said, oh, Jackie should go to university. How on earth can an Aboriginal in Inala get their daughter to go to university? When she finished going to university, became a professor.
But it must, obviously, that seemed socially like a very big obstacle at that time.
It was. But, you know, I remember at Jackie's inauguration as a university professor, she made me stand up and she said, I blame her for all this. I said, I'll take the blame, I don't mind.
And what do you think, would you say, is the value of a good educator? In what's the value to society and what's the value to individuals?
I don't know whether it's just educators, the good value to a community. I think there's a lot of good occupations out there that do great things in our society. But sometimes I think because you're working with people, and often young children or adults even, you get you gain some understanding of, you know, some of the issues they're going through and how they're trying to cope with things, and maybe when you suggest something, whether they follow that or whether they need some other ideas to help, I don't know. But it's really a great honour to be able to suggest something like that. Not saying you must do this, but if they do take you up on it and it works, it's really fantastic. I probably was emotionally involved with all the students I taught, but you try not to have that at the forefront of everything. You know, you can still see if someone's not feeling well or they're being silly because they're mucking around with somebody. There must be a reason for that. So, you know, you can see these things are happening, and then rather than point it out in a lesson, I would probably, after the lesson's over, pull them aside and say, no, it makes it difficult to teach when you're making a lot of noise in the back of the classroom. Things like that, rather than make a fool of them in front of the other kids. I didn't really like doing that. I wouldn't want to do that. Or if they didn't take notice of what I'm saying, I would, if it happened more than once, on the next occasion or occasion after that, I might say, look, if you continue doing this, I'm going to have to talk to the headmaster. I don't want to do that, but if you continue, you know, you give them sort of warnings about things, and then they know where they stand. Not that I had to take any kids to the headmaster. I can't recall doing that. Well, I have travelled a lot, but I haven't travelled much in the last few years. I've been to Europe, and that was a guiding trip, Girl Guides. I was representing Australian Girl Guides in Scotland, and while I was there, I toured through. I stayed. They had what you call people would billet you, so you stayed in the Scottish household, you know, and went and did things. Went to a ceilidh and all these sorts of wonderful things. And because my ancestry is partly Scottish, I just loved it, you know, and it was like going back to my ancestors' homeland. And then I came down and went through to London, and then went across to Germany, and because I did German at school as a language, that was a good opportunity to be able to use my language. Not that I know any of it now. So I enjoyed that very much. And I've been to New Zealand, I think, 3 times. One or two with guiding things, and one with my family, just to show them where we'd been in the guiding things, and so that was really lovely. I haven't been to Western Australia, but I've been to all the other states. No, I haven't been to Tasmania. Been to all the other states. So I've travelled around Australia a fair bit.
And you drove to Darwin on your own?
Yeah.
What prompted that?
I was in Mount Isa working, and I wasn't terribly happy with the job I had. The people on the farm that I was working at, which was about halfway between Camberwell and Mount Isa, the farm property was halfway along about 100 kilometres of road, and they just went off and left me there on my own, all on my own, way out in the middle of nowhere. And I had no idea when they were coming back. They never said they were going, and I was the tutor for the kids. So I thought, well, this is crazy. I'm being paid to be here to tutor their kids, and they haven't got the courtesy to say they're going. So I thought, oh, bugger it. I just left a note and said, I'm sorry, I just don't want to be here on my own, I'm leaving. So I just went, and I went up to Normanton, I think, and then I went across to Corumba, and then I came down to the coast, and then came, or did I go to Mount Isa? No, I might have gone out to Mount Isa as well. Came to Mount Isa and up to Normanton, and then down to the coast. So it was a good, interesting journey. But I wasn't very happy about the working situation that I was in then.
So how did it come about that you were in that job?
I had seen it advertised somewhere. I was just looking for a job, I think.
And when was this?
It was after I'd finished teaching.
Before children? Before your children?
No, my children were older then.
Okay.
Yeah, and Jeff had died.
Okay.
And I was sort of on my own, really, and I thought, oh, there must be more to life than this. So I looked around, I saw an ad for a job in North Queensland somewhere, and I applied, and they said, yes, come up, this is where we are. So I drove all the way up there. I think I went up through the inland, or if I didn't go the far inland, I went up the middle inland. And yeah, they were sort of nice-ish people, but after a while I thought, not sure about, they're using me in ways that I wouldn't, I was there to look after the farm really while they went off, took the kids with them, and I'm supposed to be there tutoring their kids, and I thought, I'm way out in the middle of nowhere. This is silly. So I got in the car, left them a note. History Queensland it was called, and that was a whole lot of history groups all over Queensland. I was part of the management team for that, to encourage groups to form, give them ideas of what to do, how to keep their groups going. Pardon me. Which I found really interesting, met lots of really nice people. Did a lot of conferences and talks and things like that. And then after a while, people moved to old age homes or they died, and there was hardly anyone left. And I said, well, there's not much point in us continuing. So the group just closed, and we left everything in the library at Cooper's Plains, so that if another group formed, all the files were there for them to continue. There was something called Toohey Forest Protection Society, So when they built the university at Griffith Uni, we thought, they need to stay there, not take over the forest and build buildings everywhere in the bushland. So Toohey Forest Protection Society started, and I think I was a member of that for a long time. It went for about 10 or 15 years, and I think I was secretary for that for about 8 of those years. And then it folded, and what else did I get involved in? Oxley Creek Catchment. I joined Oxley Creek Catchment Association, and I became it's not a ranger, but I was, if anyone wanted a talk given about Oxley Creek Catchment, or I would go and speak, and talk and answer questions, just to publicise our group and let people know what we did and where we were, come and join us, that sort of thing. So I've done a few of those. Well, one of the girls who was bridesmaid at my wedding, no, it wasn't Vicky. It wasn't. Anyway, one of my mates at high school, when we used to come home in the trolley bus, she used to go out to Camp Hill and I used to get off at East Brisbane. She said to me, how would you like to come and have a look at our brownie packet at Camp Hill? It wasn't Camp Hill, it was some other name. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. So I went out just thinking, I'm just looking at their brownie pack. I didn't think anything of it. And then she said, we're needing a brownie leader. You think you might be interested in doing that? And I said, what does it involve? You have to go and do some training. You have to go and visit other brownie packs to see what they do. And then you get qualified. They do a testing program. They check you, see how you do work with your group. And then if you get approved, you get a badge, and you're a brown owl or you're a tawny owl, was the assistant. So I went through all that process and became a brown owl. Well, it certainly helped my teaching, I think. I really think it was, you have half a dozen kids and you had to keep them engaged in something, and you had to find activities that they liked doing. And I think that had a big flow on into my teaching and helped me hopefully become a better teacher.
And you went on lots of trips.
Yeah, well, I was in guiding for 20 years and finished up. I joined the Ranger Guides at Maruka Ranger Guides, and then when you get to a certain age, you finish at Ranger Guides. So. But I was still a brownie leader, and I was also in Ranger Guides at that time. And then when I got to a certain age, you had to finish then. So then, what did I do after that? I became a brownie trainer. I used to train other leaders in becoming a brownie leader. Gosh, I haven't thought about all that for a while. Then it came to a point where I thought, done enough of this. I think I'll leave that and do something else. But 20 years of work in that, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but it took its toll over the years, I think. I've got a photograph of my two uncles standing at the bottom of a flying fox, and a flying fox in those where they had their banana farm was in Mudgeeraba, but on the very steep slopes, and so bananas were grown in terraces on these steep slopes. So when they cut the bunches of bananas at the top there, they had what was called a flying fox, and they'd hook the bunch of bananas, it's a big stalk coming out, they'd hook the bunch and let it go down, and somebody be standing at the bottom to catch it, because if they let it go, it'd smash into the posts that were there at the bottom of the flying fox and wreck all the bananas. So there'd be someone standing at the bottom waiting, and the bananas would come down, not real fast, but they'd come down with some speed, and someone would grab them, unhook them and tape them over and just put them on the ground, and then another one would come down. And one day my uncles grabbed, Uncle Bert I think it was, Dad's middle brother, grabbed the bunch of bananas and was going to put it over on the ground, and he heard sss, and he just dropped them and went. And the next lot of bananas came down and smashed, and here he was with this snake in the bananas. Yeah. But there were a lot of death adders up in Mudgeeraba, as there still are today, and they were quite dangerous snakes. You wouldn't want to be bitten by one.
What are some of the most important lessons you've learned?
I think probably to be kind to people. There are a lot of people who kindness isn't some part of their family or their life, and I think that's an important quality to have, to care for people, to have some understanding of their situation. That's probably things that come out of teaching, I think. They're probably the main things.
Well, why do you think it's important to give or to give back?
Well, it's not a one-way process. It shouldn't be a one-way process. If your teachers are kind enough to help you to become a good student and to do well at school, then if you become a teacher, then, you know, in a way you're giving that back and helping someone else to do something. So it's a two-way thing. I suppose that goes on from just sort of giving in your own family and friends and things like that. But there's a lot of needs out there in the community that the government doesn't organise or do much with, and they're not necessarily groups that will cover those sorts of things. So sometimes there's little niches here and there that need some help, maybe. I'd say enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy that, why aren't you enjoying it? Find that out. If there's no way of reconciling that, maybe you need to move on to something else. Encourage, have lots of mates and friends. That's not always easy, but it's often a good sign of a person if they've got a lot of friends. I'd say think about things before you jump in to do them. I'd say that's probably it. Well, I'm 80, going on 81 in April. Fortunately, I'm still fairly healthy. I think I see a lot of my friends whose health is not very good, and it can cause lots of issues for them. I can still drive a car. I still have a loving family. I don't have as many family members as I used to because a lot have passed on, which is sad. I would love to have my grandmother still. I'd love to have my parents still, but that's not happening. I've realised a lot of my ambitions in life. I thoroughly enjoyed teaching. I wanted to be a teacher. I enjoyed it. I like working with community groups, so I've enjoyed doing that. I can't think of any real instances where I haven't had enjoyment out of all that. A couple here and there maybe, but it's minor, nothing of any importance. It's a bit funny sometimes when you go somewhere. Sometimes people, I think I might have told you this story. I went to something at Toohey Forest, and someone asked me to come and take the walk, and so there was a gathering of people at the bottom of the car park, and one woman was talking about, oh yeah, I know Beryl Roberts, she does this and that, and she takes walks, and I thought, I looked at her and I thought, I don't know her at all. So I don't know who she was. But, people sort of assume things. I don't know where that all came from, but it's a bit strange.
And how did you come to have a park named after you? Tell me about that.
That happened in 1974. I think it was the 1st of June or something like that. And I didn't even have any idea about that. But Len Ardle was the local councillor, and Jeff and I had lived in Barham Street, which went to a dead-end street, and then in there was this big open sort of grassed area, a few trees, and a bushland area over the back, and there was a works depot there, a plumbing works depot, so the plumbers used to come in and out of our street. And I used to worry about that because our kids were little and they always wanted to play on the street. I didn't want my kids playing on the street, but all the other kids did. So I went to Len Ardle and I said, look, we've got a bit of a problem here. I just think that, somebody might get injured, run across the road when they shouldn't, and a truck comes out of there. And so he looked into it and said, we're going to close that depot down. And I said, oh, well, that's great. And I said, well, there's this, can we plant some trees in here and make a bit more bush, join it up to Toohey Forest. We were going to bring Toohey Forest down into our bushland area. And so he gave us trees to plant, and we went and dug holes and planted trees and looked after them. And then someone said, oh, we could set up an adventure playground. So we got a load of sand, and then the Harbours and Marines group gave us a cabin cruiser that was unseaworthy. So we put that in the sand pit and had big wharf ropes with things hanging off that kids could swing on, and made this adventure playground. And then one time when we went down to the park, the boat was gone. Someone had picked it up and stolen it and taken it, even though it was unseaworthy. So I hope nobody got out to sea and it sunk on them. But, that's what happened, and I thought, can't be bothered anymore if they're going to do things like that. It's just terrible. So they did eventually build another playground up further in the park, and then Jeff worked as a cartographer. My husband worked as a cartographer in the lands department, and he said, there's an area over there called open space on the other side of the levee bank, that's open space. And I said, what does that mean? We could put a pathway through the bushland and go out through there and link up to Troughton Road. And he said, yeah, we should be able to do that. So we went for a walk and sort of waddled through the creek and went over and had a look around. And he said, we could probably come around here and maybe we could do another loop there, So we had this idea, and then we went to the local alderman again and brought him out there and said, we could do this. And that would save the kids who live up there who go to the Coopers Plains School going where all the busy roads are. They could walk straight through there and go to school and come home through there, and other people as well. So that's how it happened. Just and then they said, oh, we're going to name the park after you. I said, oh, really? I didn't expect that. So it's a great honour. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of writing.
What are you writing now?
I'm writing my family's story at the moment. But I'm in a writers group, so we have to do some writing each week. So I usually find some small thing that I can write about. And so I've got a whole lot of that writing. I don't know whether I'll ever publish it or not. It's probably not worth publishing, but who knows? Maybe.
Art?
Yes, I do go to an art group on Wednesdays, and lovely group of people. That's probably why I go, because I'm not very artistic. But I like it, and I like sketching, and I like pencil drawing and ink drawing. I'm not very good at painting, so I always sort of mess it up when I start putting paint on it. So I sometimes tend to just do sketches. But anyway, I really enjoy that.
And what does it mean to be Australian?
Oh, I would not want to be anything else. I am very thankful to my ancestors for coming to Australia. One of them didn't want to come to Australia. He was a convict. But my other ancestors came to Australia. So 3 of the 4 of my great ancestors, I don't know who they were, can't remember all their names, came to live in Australia. And I just look around the world and think, I see Trump, and I think, no, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else in the world except New Zealand. If I had to leave Australia for some reason, I'd go and live in New Zealand. But I can't think of anywhere else I'd like to live. I quite like the climate of Brisbane. It gets a bit hot sometimes and it gets a bit cold in winter, but on the whole it's a lovely climate, and it's where I've lived most of my life, so I enjoy living here.
That's all. Thank you.
Oh, that's my pleasure.